what I know for sure is that speaking your truth is the most powerful tool we all have.
I've had rainbows in my clouds. And the thing to do, it seems to me, is to prepare yourself so that you can be a rainbow in somebody else's cloud.
We all really, really love one another. Deep down, we all love one another, and we need to get back to that.
Hi, welcome to Authentically You podcast. I'm Dr. Julie Ducharme, back for another session, and I'm excited today to have Randy Rozzell with me. Randy is a retired Navy SEAL with 22 years of military experience. He's been involved in multiple combat deployments and received extensive training. In 2012, Randy was named the SEAL Team Sailor of the Year, and he retired as the leading chief course and program manager for Naval Special Warfare Combatives programs. He developed a new 6-week-long Combatives Instructor Course that never existed before Naval Special Warfare and is the pinnacle of what SEALs learn today in combatives. Randy now teaches military units, SWAT teams, law enforcement agencies, Border Patrol, and civilians during his days off as his job as a firefighter. Randy has received multiple awards, and here he's mentioned he has 4 from the Navy and Marine Corps and 2 from the Army. And he was also named Firefighter of the Year by the VFW in Poway, which really just brings me to the point, Randy, that you're a big overachiever. And that fits into my realm because I'm a big overachiever. And he has so many qualifications, guys, that I couldn't even list them. They're on his website, AmericanWarriorCombatives.com, and as well as all the trainings that you have. I think you and I could compare like 8-page resumes, probably. So today we're going to talk a bit about you and kind of everything that's going on. And we're going to go back. So this is all amazing what's happening in your life right now. And for those of you listening, I've got a chance to work with Randy the last couple months and do some training with him. I think he's the only person who's got to put me in headlocks and knock me around, which is quite comical. So let's talk a bit, though, about before you were this stud Navy SEAL and firefighter and combative instructor. Let's go back a little bit with your story, because you've told me a little bit about you and growing up and some of the barriers that you faced. And so I'd love for you to share with us about just a little bit of your story. Like, how did where in the beginning you were get you to where you are today?
Well, I'm from a very small town in Texas. It's called Nocona. And anybody that's ever been to Nocona or any of these small Texas towns know there's not much of a future hanging out around those towns unless you just love it. I have friends that stay there. They love it, and that's how they've built their lives. And they do great. But I always felt like I was meant for something more. And come from a single family. It was just me and my dad, and he owned a restaurant and had to sell it. And then he worked for my grandparents at their restaurant, so we never had very much money growing up. And I knew he didn't have money for college to send me, and I was a good athlete for a small town, but not good enough to get a full ride scholarship to any college. So college was a little bit out of the question. And the school I went to didn't really give me any guidance on anything, on how to apply for college, how to get a scholarship, how to get a loan. Most people just stayed there. Somehow all my friends, though, found ways to go to college. Maybe I was a dummy out of them. But I took the military ASVAB, and I did well on it. And then I took another test by the military, the nuclear power program test. And I passed that. So the Navy sought me out. They were like, "Oh my gosh, you're supposedly a smart kid," even though I had 0 life experience. But I had recruiters calling me all the time for the Navy. And the more I found out about the nuclear power program, the more I didn't want to be a nuke. But I wanted to join the Navy. Yeah. So I utilized the military as a way to get myself out of my hometown. I used to see guys that had graduated high school that would come and pick up their high school girlfriends at lunch and take them around this thing called the drag, where they would pick them up and drive them around at lunchtime and then go drop them back off. And then they would come pick them up after school, and pick up their girlfriends and drive them around again. And that's something that people do in small towns. That's how you get to...
I feel like maybe we both grew up in, like, are you sure we didn't grow up in the same town? Because I grew up in Lindsay, and it was that small.
So me, walking back and forth from football practice, would always see these guys that graduated high school picking up their girlfriends. And I just used to say to myself, that's never going to be me. When I get done with high school, I'm going to have something better to do than come pick up my high school girlfriend after I've graduated. I'm going to find anything to do, more than that. So the Navy sought me out, so I decided to join the Navy. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. The more I found out about the nuclear power program and how you had to be on a submarine or on an aircraft carrier, that didn't sound appealing to me. And even though I was good at math and good at chemistry, I didn't enjoy it. I wanted, I was a football player. I wanted to have more of a life of adventure. My aunt had just graduated nursing school, and my dad, as my recruiter, he sat down with me at my grandparents' restaurant, brought this poster board to us, and it had all these jobs in the Navy. And he goes, Randy, I don't think you understand how well you've done on this test. He goes, you can pick out any job you want.
Wow.
He's like, most kids, they get like this block, or some get this block, but you can be anything. And he's like, what do you want to be? And I'm like, I had no clue what I was looking at. So I see like these pictures of these Navy rates, like machinist mate, gunner's mate, electrician's mate. So all these jobs, I have no clue what they do. And they've got like this little paragraph blurb of what they are. And even though like I'm book smart, I have no world sense to me, no military sense to me at all. And so my dad's reading along, and we're trying to figure out what the heck I should choose. And he goes, well, why don't you choose this corpsman one? Because your aunt just graduated nursing school, and she makes good money, and you'll have something to do when you get out. So I chose to become a corpsman, and off I went to Navy boot camp. And first time I'd ever been on a bus was a Greyhound bus leaving Nocona, Texas, to take me to Dallas MEPS. So I could go to MEPS, and then after MEPS, I stayed at the Days Inn Hotel and get on a plane. First time I'd ever been on a plane.
Wow. Flew
me to Great Lakes, Illinois, and off to boot camp I went. And after that, it just, that's where it all started.
Well, and so for people who may not know, what is a corpsman? What is the job of
Oh, sorry. A corpsman is like a medic.
Okay.
So in the Navy, they call them hospital corpsmen. The Army calls them medics. If you grew up watching, Vietnam and World War II movies like I did, the Marines, they don't have medics. They have Navy corpsmen.
Okay.
So anywhere there's a Marine, there's got to be a Navy corpsman.
Okay.
Anywhere there's a sailor, there's got to be a Navy corpsman. Somebody's got to give them medicine and, wipe their noses.
Okay. Got it.
Bandage them up when they get hurt and, keep their records. And that's pretty much what a corpsman does. Corpsmen, though, they have a unique history. They have more medals of honor than any other rate or job in the military, and that's due to serving with the Marines. So a lot of corpsmen have selflessly sacrificed themselves for the Marine counterparts. So there's a lot of pride in being a Navy corpsman, and that's what I did my first 10 years in the military. I was a Navy corpsman, and I served with the Marines the majority of the time that I was in.
So then how did you transition into being a Navy SEAL?
Well, I actually didn't read Marcinko's book. I had a buddy of mine who read Richard Marcinko's book. I'd watched the movie Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen, and that looked cool, especially to a 15, 16-year-old kid. But the internet wasn't around, back in the early 90s that it is to today. And I couldn't afford, my dad and I couldn't afford a computer anyways, even had it been there. So the information that's out now is just wasn't there back then, So we got our information from movies and books, and I didn't know anybody that had been a SEAL before. So when I joined is when I started learning more about SEALs. And it always intrigued me. I wondered if I could pass the program. I always heard, oh, SEALs is the hardest military program. And, you know, my buddy had read Marcinko's book, and he thought, like, you had to run 5-minute miles and bench 500 pounds and do all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, my, I can't bench 500 pounds. I'm pretty strong. But even if I ever could bench 500 pounds, I'm pretty sure I couldn't run a 5-minute mile if I could do that. And the whole thing was just not true. Yeah. So you don't have to be that way. You do have to be in really good shape. But as I was going through my military career, I wanted to be something more than just a corpsman. You know, once September 11th kicked off is when, you know, there's no war when I joined. So when that happened, I thought I'd really miss my chance. You know, I always wanted, you know, as I grew up watching those movies, I always wondered what I would do in those situations. How would I perform if we were ambushed or in war or under fire and returning fire? You know, people always think that, oh, you don't want any part of that. You know, it's scary and that's bad and it's going to mess you up. And I never thought of it that way. I always watched those movies and wanted to be in those situations to test myself, to see how would I do? How would I perform? Would I be heroic? Would I be a coward? I hope I wouldn't be a coward. You know, would I be a casualty? I don't know. I always thought I would, you know, kind of, as you watch those movies, I think you always kind of want to be the hero of the story, you know? And so I wondered how I would be. Well, September 11th happened, and that gave me the opportunity to actually go to war and to see how I would perform. Well, as a corpsman, I would never be the number one guy in a door. The Marines actually value their corpsmen. So to them you're always docked. So you're always in the back. And that didn't fit very well with my personality. So, you know, as I learned more about SEALs and would read more about SEALs, I'm like, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to be the guy in the front. I want to be the door kicker. I want to be the number one or number two guy going in and hunting the enemy where they live. And, you know, so that became my opportunity to try out for the SEAL teams and go off to BUDS. It was funny, I had a buddy that had gone and taken the recon test, and he was like, Randy, you got to be recon. You know, recon corpsman is where it's at. So I went and I took the recon test, and I passed it. It was hard. It was really tough. It was like a 3-4 hour test. Wow. But I think they make the recon test so hard that if you can pass that test, you got a really good chance to pass the recon. There is no test that you can do for BUDS that if you pass this test, you have a really good chance of passing BUDS. Right. You know, 80% of the people fall out and they all pass the test to get in. Yeah. So it's the BUDS test was actually not as hard as the recon test, but BUDS is completely different than going through basic reconnaissance school or any other school out there. So, but I had to wait 18 months before I could go to BRC, Basic Reconnaissance Course. And I'm like, oh man, I'm in shape now. I'm ready to go now. And so I didn't want to wait that 18 months. And a message came out in this magazine called The Link Perspective, which before the internet would come out and they would give you this magazine. It would have like all the needs of the Navy, like what jobs are hot, what could you do? And it said, the SEAL teams need corpsmen. There is no minimum time that you have to wait. If you pass the test, they're going to cut your orders and you're going to go. I'm like, well, shoot, I'd rather be a SEAL anyways than go recon. You know, SEAL is the standard. At least that's what I'd always heard. And so, and I had a recon chief that had told me he always regretted not becoming a SEAL instead of going recon. And I really respected the guy. And so I went over to recon. I'm like, well, hey, can you guys give me the BUDS test, the test to become a SEAL? And they were so offended that they'd already given me the recon test and I passed it. Now I didn't want to be recon. They wouldn't give it to me. They're like, no. What, you're too good for recon now, Doc? They're like, no, beat it. You know? So I had to leave. I was in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. So I had to leave Camp Lejeune, drive down to Charleston, South Carolina, to an EOD unit down there that would give me the test. So I had to drive 4 hours away.
That's funny.
To take the test.
Well, they didn't want to lose you.
Well, and then the EOD chief that gave me the test tried to talk me into going EOD instead of going to SEAL teams. So he was like, you'll get to serve with SEALs, and, this is way more, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, why don't you come join us? And I'm like, I just want to try this thing.
That's
so that led me on the path to becoming a SEAL.
That's very cool. Now, you had mentioned to me how difficult it was, obviously, to become a SEAL, and that you had to go through the program 4 times.
Yeah. So I was unsuccessful 3 times. I didn't make it through Hell Week. I made it to training and made it to Hell Week, and I got injured, and then I went to rollback land. This is where they send you when you don't make it through Hell Week, or if you get hurt due to injury or due to academic standards or not making times, you get rolled back. So I made it into Hell Week 3 times, and I got rolled back. 2 of the times I quit during rollback land, which means that I got injured, and now I'm waiting to class up again, and I lost heart, and I quit. I actually went and rang the bell. And that, for a person that had always been successful at everything they tried, and they never quit anything, it was quite devastating to me. And I kind of lost myself for a little while, and who I was, and what I thought I was, and who I stood for, and what I thought I stood for, and it was pretty devastating to me, so much that I was going to get out of the Navy, join the Air Force, wanted to become a PJ. Wow. I was all set to do that. And I was very bitter at BUD/S, all Naval Special Warfare, for somehow not making it through. I became bitter, like it was their fault instead of my fault somehow. But I was the one who quit. They didn't make me ring the bell. They didn't injure me. I mean, injuries happen. And I was almost done with it, just wiping my hands because I was bitter. And I left Coronado. I went to Charleston Naval Hospital. And when I was there, people started talking to me about BUD/S. They're like, oh my gosh, you went to BUD/S? God, we've never known anybody who went to BUD/S. Like, oh my gosh. And they're like, you didn't make it, but what was it like? And they started talking to me about it and started getting me talking about it. And the more I talked about it and the more people would ask me questions, I realized that I couldn't leave my heart out on the beach in Coronado. And that's where it was at. And I knew I had to go back. I knew that being knocked out of the saddle wasn't... I couldn't replace it with becoming a PJ. I couldn't replace it with going recon, going back with the Marines. I had to accomplish this goal. Nothing would finish that, quench that thirst in me. So I went back for a 3rd time, and I got hurt again. So now I'm in rollback land, and...
You have to be just like at this point, like... God, what's going on?
Yes, I was. And my dad even was like, Randy, maybe this is not for you. He was like, you're smart. Why don't you become a PA? Why don't you become a doctor? Why don't you take all this energy and drive that you have and redirect into something here? You can still be important, and I'm like, no, I'm meant for this, Dad. I know I'm meant for this. So I end up going through Hell Week a 4th time, and I make it. And then I get into 2nd phase. And then I don't make it through pool comp and 2nd phase.
Is that where they make you go under and they tie knots?
Yeah. Okay. So I end up perfing my ear, and I just hide it. So perforated my eardrum during one of the evolutions. Wow. So now I'm trying to make it through these evolutions with the perfed eardrum. And it's painful, and you're disoriented. I'm like, if I can just make it through pool. It's like making it through Hell Week. If you just make it through Hell Week, if anything bad happens to you after Hell Week, you don't start at the beginning. You're already past Hell Week. Well, the same thing happens in 2nd phase when you make it past pool comp. Well, as long as you make it past pool comp, you get rolled at the end of pool comp. So I'm like, I just got to make it past this. And I couldn't. It was too much pain, too much disorientation. I was trying to gut through it, and I couldn't. and I got rolled again because I couldn't make it through that. And so I had to do second phase all over again from the beginning. So now I'm just like, oh my gosh, like it's just everything is just keep retreading, keep going through. And the perseverance that it took to keep going through that was, I had to have this belief in myself, but to think that I woke up every day feeling that like, oh, I'm meant for this. It wasn't there every day. There were days that I was just like, am I going to make this? I don't know. Is this really for me? I don't know. What's going to knock me out of the saddle today? So there were definitely times of doubt, but it was a continuing on that the pressing forward that allowed me to do it. And I will tell you that once I finally made it, once I finally put on my trident, it meant so much to me.
Yeah.
These years of trying to make it, and then finally getting there. When I became a SEAL, it meant a lot. So when, I really wanted to be the best SEAL I could be. And that's what, you mentioned that I got, in 2012, I got the SEAL Team 7 Sailor of the Year. And then I went on and got Naval Special Warfare Command. They call it WARCOM, SEAL Sailor of the Year. And that was, it was just due to being so appreciative for being a SEAL and then wanting to be the best SEAL I could be, and just loving the SEAL teams that I was able to accomplish that. And then I had good people around me too, right?
Oh yeah.
So nobody does anything by themselves.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I had good leaders and I had good friends, and that, just kept inspiring me to be more and give me direction.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I'm not military, but I'm an athlete, and I get that. I definitely came into sports as an underdog. No club, no training. Same thing. My parents were middle class. We didn't have a lot of money. I literally had to walk on to courts and prove myself to try and get a scholarship. And there was definitely those moments of when you were talking about, which really resonates with me, when you're like, I don't really know if I have it today, like had those moments. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who have had those moments in a variety of places in their lives, not just in the military and not just in sports. And I think that's important. And I like for people to hear your story because you had plenty of reasons why you could have walked away. I mean, you had plenty. You had injuries. I mean, and I'm sorry, but I don't know many people who would want to go through that 3 times, 4 times.
I think I'm the only one I think I am the only SEAL that has gone first phase and then through breakout, which is the first part of Hell Week, 4 times.
I mean, because it's essentially like torture, basically.
It definitely feels like it at the time. And what's bad about going through it before and then again and again and again is there's no surprises.
Yeah, so
At least the first time when I was going through, it's like everything was brand new. Yeah. So I'm like, I was just not quitting just to see how bad it could get. Right. I'm like, it can't get much worse than this. Oh, look, it's worse. But then once you've gone through it again, you're like, oh, this is horrible. Oh, this is awful. And there are definitely times I'd be running on that soft sand or freezing, in surf torture, being like, oh, is this really worth it? Is this really what I want? Am I really going to go through this all again and again? Carrying the boats on your head, being wet and sandy all day long, getting chafed in places you didn't know you had, carrying the logs, it just, and the daily grind of it is really what just wears you out. And to know what's coming and to do it again, and then to do it again, and then to do it again, and then do it a 4th time. It's just like, oh man, how stubborn is this person?
Yeah.
I'm the human equivalent of a donkey.
But at the same time, I think that, that type of grit and that type of courage just builds something inside of you. Like, I would definitely want you on my team because of your grit and courage and your persistence. And like you said, you knew what was coming, 2nd, 3rd round, and you still went back for it.
There's things too that people will tell you. Like they say in BUD/S, if you quit, once a quitter, always a quitter. That's only true if you believe that.
Right.
I chose not to believe that because I did quit. I did let myself down. I did, what's even worse than letting someone else down is letting yourself down. And when you break your own heart, it's worse than someone else doing it. When you let your own self down, when you know you're meant for something, it's worse than it's worse than some outside force knocking you out.
Yeah.
And to build yourself back from that, to be like, hey, wait, no, that's not me. That's not who I am. This is who I am, and this is what I stand for. So people that, the worst defeat is self-defeat. And to choose not to believe, once a quitter, always a quitter, and be like, no, wait, that's not true. That's just some saying.
Yeah.
And I don't choose to believe that. You can't quit. You can't let yourself down. And you can build yourself back up, and you can come back better for it.
So true. And I hear everything you're saying. I mean, this is your story, but I'm just thinking about all the different times in my life that people were like, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you shouldn't be doing this. And you're right. That's the part where you're saying, like, I was meant to do this. I get that. I get that big time, because that's where that's what kept me going. Was like, well, you may think I'm stupid, but I was meant to do this, so I'm going to figure it out. So this great career in the military, right? 23 years. So what makes you decide to transition out of this amazing career?
Well, children.
Okay. I hear that. Amen to that.
Yeah, so I eventually got married, right? I was married twice before, and I finally found Casey, my wife, and she's an amazing, strong woman who can tolerate all of this. So, but she's a school teacher, and she was a single mom for a long time with the luxury of 2 paychecks. And my oldest was from a previous marriage, and I pretty much missed almost her entire. She's 19. I missed almost her entire life. My 12-year-old daughter, I saw her born on Skype, and was missing her life. And then my son, I was on a 6-month deployment. I came home for 2 weeks, and then I deployed for 6 months again. And that's when Casey got pregnant with my son during those 2 weeks. And then, so I got to miss 6 months of the pregnancy, which was actually a blessing, according to me. But I started missing a good portion of my kids' lives. And, there was always a way that I viewed myself as a father and as a husband. And being gone all the time wasn't the way I viewed myself, and when you grow up in a broken home, and with certain things that happen to you as a kid, you always think like, hey, when you think about your future and who you are going to be, you want to be different than what you saw in some ways, right? And then what you experienced in some ways, you want to be better.
Yeah.
But I never saw myself as the dad that was always gone. So I wanted to be the present dad, the dad that takes his kids fishing and hunting and camping and helps with homework, and I wasn't that dad. I wasn't. I was a dad that was gone all the time, and then when I was home, I was tired.
Yeah.
So I decided to take instructor duty at the end of my career, and once I took instructor duty, I got to be the dad I wanted to be. And my kids, I really liked them. It was weird. I'm like, wow, kind of
so strange.
So weird. Like,
I like you.
I like you guys. And my wife, I was like, oh man, like,
nice to meet you again.
I kind of liked her too, and so during instructor duty, I got to be the husband, and I got to be the father I wanted to be. And then when I thought about going back to the team and leaving all of that again, once I got to do it, I didn't want to.
That's so interesting to hear this from a guy's perspective, because a lot of times that's what us women are saying, right? Like when I got into a big position, and I was having my babies, I was like, God, like I can never be here for my children. Like I need to switch my life up so I can like be present. I don't want them with a nanny all day long and stuff. So it's probably the first time I've ever heard a guy actually tell me that he really wanted to be home with his kids, which probably a lot of people take for granted because they are home a lot and they don't realize what it's like to be gone all the time. But I really admire that, because I know a lot of guys who are like, whatever, it's good, you know, you take care of them, you know, I'll do this. And so it's cool to hear that was just as important to you as your career was, because a lot of people don't want to sacrifice their career for that. So it's very cool to hear that. So you decided to get out, you retired, right, from this like very high adrenaline job, which being an athlete, when I retired from an athlete, it was tough for me. I had definitely had some depression because I was used to having 5-hour-a-day practices, like going. I lived for the game. So how did you transition out and probably had this big gap, I'm guessing. So how did that happen?
Well, instructor duty helped, right? So taking instructor duty, I went from operating, at the SEAL, at the platoon level at the SEAL team, to taking instructor duty. And instructor duty helped ease that transition, because now, even though yes, I'm a SEAL and I have this, high speed, low drag career, or high adrenaline career, instructor duty allowed me to, take a break from that, give back to the community that had given me so much and that I loved. So, getting to be a husband and a father there, it allowed me to slow down a little bit and reflect. And then transitioning out, I decided to become a firefighter. And a lot of people think firefighting is a high adrenaline job, and it definitely can be at times, but it's not the same as being a SEAL. I had so many people when I was going through fire academy like, oh, how does this compare to BUD/S? I'm like, are you crazy? Are you crazy? We have people graduate fire academies every day in the United States that but it's just funny. It's just, but people don't know and they have questions, so I try to always answer them respectfully. But there is no comparison between a fire academy and going through BUD/S. And then people ask me about like, well, fire, how is that compared to like combat? And I'm like, well, fire is not personal. If fire does what fire does, you have to always respect it or it will kill you. But it's not personal. It's not purposely trying to kill you.
Right.
In combat, somebody else is purposely trying to kill you. Right. And it's which you take way more personally.
I would take a little personal if someone was trying to kill me.
It's it's very different. The adrenaline for it is different.
But it seems like you have a little bit more flexible schedule.
I do. I have a lot more flexible schedule. I work a 24-hour shift, and then I'm off the next day, and that gives me time to do other things.
Right.
It gives me time to be there with the kids. Transitioning out, my wife is funny because she was like, you never really processed getting out of the SEAL teams and becoming a firefighter. So what I did was, during that instructor duty, I set myself up to go into the fire service right away. Once I was on instructor duty for about 6 months, I kind of realized going back to the team and leaving them again was, not really an option for me. I wanted to be with them. So I started looking at what did I want to do when I get out. And fire had never been on my radar. I'd never thought about it. But I had a couple buddies, SEAL team buddies, who had got out and became firefighters. And they're like, Randy, you got to do this. Like, you're going to love it. It's kind of like the teams. And it's not like the teams in adrenaline. What it is about the teams is you're with a small group of guys and, girls in the fire service, but you have a common mission, right? And there's a camaraderie. You're with each other all day long. You live with each other. And that kind of camaraderie and that kind of depending on someone and a team and under stressful situations it's similar to the SEAL teams. So they're like, you're going to like this. So literally I retired on on September 30th, September 30th, 2016, and I started the Fire Academy October 1st, the next day,
Wow.
2016. So I didn't give myself much of a time to stop, because why would I? What am I going to do? Like, go sit home for a couple of months and just...
And I hear that's oftentimes detrimental when you're coming out of such a high performance job. There's like that, like, what am I
going to do? Drink every day?
Right.
Like,
Right.
like I don't, especially when the kids are in school during that time, like, what am I... no. Why would I not just keep pressing forward? Why?
You're an overachiever. We're very similar in our overachievingness. We don't sleep a lot. We work hard. We're going. But that's like how we're made. Yeah. I've heard from a lot of veterans that when they had that gap year where they're like, oh, I'm just going to take a whole year off, they say it was the toughest year of my life. Like, I didn't know what to do with myself.
Well, I would be bored, senseless. Yeah. Like, why do that?
Yeah.
Now, like a week or two, why not take a vacation if you're burned out on something?
Yeah.
But I wasn't burned out on anything. I was coming from instructor duty. Mm-hmm. I was ready to get started again. I was ready to close that chapter and start the next one.
Yeah. Well, so you started being a firefighter, but then you started adding in what you're doing now, which is your combative trainings.
Yes.
So, and I want to talk about this because I hear a lot of times, especially from military who are transitioning out, that they don't know how to apply their skills in another work setting.
Yes.
And we do a lot of talk about, leadership skills and transition and teamwork and all of that. But what I love what you're doing, obviously, is you're taking a passion of yours and you're bringing it to the civilian world and you're helping translate this. So let's talk about your other business. So you're doing a million things at once right now. You're also in school, but you're American Warrior Combatives and what you're doing with that. And as I mentioned earlier, Randy's probably the only person who's got to put me in a headlock, throw me around the room, choke me, all that good stuff.
In all fairness, you got to do it back to me.
I did. So, but, I've had some run-ins with some people, and I really wanted to, I'm all about continuing to learn. And I wanted to make sure that I could protect myself and my kids and understand how to get out of situations that might not be great, especially in this day and age. We see it happening all the time, more and more. So I've been learning a lot. So let's talk about this business that you're doing in between I think too, a lot of times I see you right after you've worked a 24-hour shift, so you haven't slept, But let's talk about that and what's happening with that.
So when I was in the military, I got to I grew up with two older brothers, so I always grew up kind of fighting. Step brothers don't have the same loyalty that real brothers have. So step brothers will beat you up. One was 2 years older than me, one was 5 years older than me, in a different way than like you will a real brother. Because my little brother, I never fought him the way my step brothers would fight me. And when their friends would come over, they weren't like, oh, hey, that's my brother, don't mess with him, like I did my little brother. They're like, hey, that's my stepbrother, kick his butt, I don't care, he's annoying me. So I grew up fighting a lot. Not because I was like in a gang neighborhood or anything like that. It's a very small town, but small town kids fight a lot too. It's just different. We don't shoot each other. So then I joined my mom had, when I was living with my mom, she got me in Taekwondo because I got tired of my stepbrothers beating up on me. And so I always had a love for martial arts. I loved like Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, all those movies that we watched growing up. And then I joined the military, and when I was with the Marines, I got to do the old Marine Corps line training. And I thought that was cool because I really didn't know anything else other than just brawling. And then the Marines came out with their new McMap program in 2001. And 2001. I got to do that. I got to do it in 2001 or 2002. It starts to blend together. But it was brand new. I was one of the only corpsmen to get to go through it. And I graduated it, and I got to become an instructor in that. And it made me think I was tough. And I really wasn't, but I thought I was. And so I was just always intrigued in that. I used to do tough man competitions.
Oh, wow.
Tough man is when... it was before the UFC and MMA. It was just pretty much bar brawling with gloves, with 16-ounce gloves. So I used to do those things, and And they were fun, but I was just young and tough and didn't really know what I was doing, and definitely not as skilled as like today's fighters are. These guys are super athletes. So I was just hard-headed. But then, once I became a SEAL, I couldn't wait to go through SEAL combatives. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to be like Jason Bourne when I come out of this. I can't wait. When do I get to go to like ninja and spy school?
I do love those movies.
Right. So this was my thought. I'm like, I'm going to be, I'm going to be like John Wick.
Oh yeah.
Once
You're bringing all the great ones.
So I went through SEAL combatives training, and at the time it was called CQD, and I loved the instructors. The instructors were the best instructors that I'd had so far in BUD/S. I love the guys, but the program was horrible. So it was so bad. The actual program was horrible, but the SEALs were great guys and great instructors. But what they were actually learning was subpar, just very subpar for today's operators' needs. And even having prior Marine Corps experience, I was disappointed in going through CQD. They had some good drills, but the actual program itself was not good. And then once I got overseas and got to operate as a SEAL operator, it really opened my eyes to how bad our current program was. And of course, I wasn't the only SEAL that had this epiphany. There was a group of us that I know a lot of us were like, hey, this program is bad. We need a better one. I'd gotten some hand-to-hand fights for my life downrange, and you don't have to be in very many of those before you realize that, hey, I need more training. Now, of course, I'm here. I survived those, but a lot of it, it was will. It wasn't due to specific techniques I had. It hadn't been to specific training I'd had thus far. It was just due to pure will and wanting to live more than the other guy. So when I came back, I started doing some mixed martial arts training. I looked at Krav Maga, started doing some Krav Maga training. I was looking at all of these things to try to just get better. And none of it, really applied to what I was doing downrange, So eventually I became the chief of combatives, which is Naval Special Warfare's hand-to-hand combatives program. Now, the chief before me, he had realized the same thing I had, and had already gone away from the CQD program. And so I got really lucky, and since he had already gone away from that and started changing it, I just got to pick up the football where he dropped it off and run it further down the field. So I got to help continue on the revamp of the program that he already did for the basic combatives program. But as SEALs, as a Naval Special Warfare as a whole, we didn't have a way to make SEALs. We didn't have a new program really for all of them, or a way to take the guys in the current, teams, get them up to date. So I came up with the idea to make SEAL instructors, since I'd already been a Marine Corps martial arts instructor. And I saw what the Marine Corps does and their plan. And then when I went through 18 Delta, I got to do training Army combatives, and I saw their plan and how they were doing things. And for us as SEALs, we were behind the power curve. And to me, that was unacceptable. I'm like, hey, wait, we're the pinnacle. We're supposed to be the pinnacle of everything. But when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, which is actually things that we do downrange, we were lagging behind. And I'm like, that's unacceptable for the SEAL teams. And I got to go to a conference a training conference where I got to go with a lot of SEALs that, the upper brass, master chiefs and commanders and captains. And as a chief, I got to brief them on this and tell them like, hey, we're subpar. The Army and Marine Corps are like doing better than we are. And, I have the experience, and I've been with them to tell you this is what they're doing, and we're supposed to be better. So they allowed me to develop the program.
Wow.
And I spent 6 months to a year developing this program. So when I got out, of course I passed it on, and it hasn't changed much. It's what the pinnacle of what SEALs learn today in hand-to-hand combat. But now I just felt like all this knowledge was dying with me. So I'm a firefighter, but I'm like, I spent all these years and all this time developing these skills and developing this knowledge and making this program. Yeah, NSW has it, but what can I do? How can I help firefighters? How can I help police officers? How can I help people like you, that just need certain things, and then maybe they don't want to be SEAL operators, but they want to know how to defend themselves with something that's practical. Because I didn't need fluff in the SEAL teams. People didn't need to be learning, things that weren't effective. They didn't need to be taking 10 years to master a martial arts. They needed what needed to work now and then. And there's a lot of martial arts that, have a good philosophy, but the practicality of it, like, hey, violence of action, we're going to be violence of action. We're going to do this and this and this in the fray. And then you go learn the technique, and you're like, well, wait, your philosophy is awesome, but your technique doesn't lead to that.
Yeah.
Your technique is 12 steps.
Yeah.
Well, who's going to remember 12 steps in the fray?
Right.
No one.
No one.
Right? So I wanted to give people something easy and effective that they could remember. And that led me to building the business. That was a super long answer to your question. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I wanted to take that knowledge that I'd gained through 22 years of military experience, training, and combat tours, and, share it with people that I thought could use it, like other military people. I have buddies that are SWAT teams. While I was down in Naval Special Warfare, I got to train some SWAT teams. I got to train some Border Patrol guys. I got to, I had different units seeking me out, being like, hey, what do SEALs learn? And they would come and they train with me and be like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. We need something like this to be our program. And so when I got out, some of those relationships with these SWAT teams and with these Border Patrol and with some of these other units that I was training, that relationship died when I retired. And these people still needed this training. So it led me to build a business. And then I thought I was only going to be training like military units, SWAT teams, special operations group from like Border Patrol and other. And as I went along and, I trained jiu-jitsu. I love jiu-jitsu. I train it every day. I would have more and more people come up to me and ask me about self-defense and what I could do. And then I had people like women that would come up to me and be like, hey, what would you teach me? So then I had to start thinking about like, well, how do I take what I would utilize as a SEAL operator and, take out the stuff that where, I don't have a gun or a knife and teach it to a woman, and how would I make this practical? So that led me to developing the Women's Self-Defense course, to developing, the Combatives course for men and for civilians. So now I can teach people, from combat shooting, an actual real way to shoot other than just going to a range and killing paper, right? To clearances, to home invasion, to just self-defense. So,
well, and I think something that's interesting is I've been reading this book about from someone and who's was in the FBI, and he was talking about the mentality of people, and like someone would come in and there would be one shooter and there would be 15 people, and they would they'd say, well, we just sat there and waited to die. Right? Like they just had this mentality of like, well, there's one of you, the guy took time to reload his gun. Why didn't you guys? Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The victim, and there's a lot of that. Like you hear that all over. I even had a friend who was like, oh, you would get yourself out of a situation. I'd just lay there and die. And I'd be like, lay there and die? Like I have 2 kids. Like I'm going to do everything I can to fight, to survive. And I've always had that mentality. But I feel like a lot of the mentality is today, just let them do what they want. Just sit there and hide, or, and I think that mentality is being taught to our youth. And I think it really has to change, because I was always raised with you fight, you fight to get your way out of it. But so many people, especially women I know, are like, well, I've been told you just, just lay on the ground and just stay there. And I think that what you're teaching is so important.
Well, so when a woman lays on the ground, we'll say an assault or a rape type situation, which is really horrible, you're going to think about it's their plan becomes hope. They're hoping that this person that is assaulting them or raping them is not going to kill them afterwards. That's really it. Their plan is hope.
Right.
That's it. Well, hope is not a plan.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I have 2 daughters and I have a wife, and I train all 3 of them. And I would never in my wildest dreams tell them to lay there, to allow something like that to happen to them. What are they going to be like afterwards if they don't fight, if they just lay there? They're never going to be the same. Mm-mm. But what if they fought out of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What if they fight back and they survive?
Yeah.
Who are they going to be after that?
I think much stronger person.
Way more empowered, a much stronger person. So, and your chances of survival of just fighting back increase significantly. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know where people came up with that faulty, thinking of laying there. It seems so wrong to me. It had to be someone that didn't like women very much. Well, that said that. They came up with that.
Well, think about this. Like, when the shooters come into those nightclubs and other places and they interview people and they talk all the time about, well, I just waited to die, and you're like, I always ask myself this question. I've always come from not a victim mentality, right? Mm-hmm. So like my first thing is when I hear, okay, there was one shooter and there was 30 people. My first thought was, why didn't they tackle the shooter? Why didn't, right. And they talk about, oh, well, he reloaded his gun. Mm-hmm. Guess what? When he's reloading, he's not shooting. Right. And so I always ask those questions, which oftentimes people will be like, oh, that's so like not nice. And I'm like, well, no, it's just like, why are we not fighting back? And I think that victim mentality is really pushed a lot. I think people are told all the time, well, just don't fight back and then they won't shoot you. Or they'll just, do whatever they need to do. But I've never taught my kids to let someone do that to them. And so I think it's important because training with you, I haven't had the type of training ever like what you've done, where you very much come from like this, you're not a victim, you're gonna fight back. And this is what you're going to do to get yourself out of it. And it's practical things, too, that we talked about how when I was younger, I'd been attacked 3 different times. Mm-hmm. And I was younger, and I was able to fight them off because I was physically fit and in that. Now, 2 knee surgeries, back surgery later, like it doesn't, nothing works the way it used to. I say I hit my 40s and nothing works the way it used to. But you've given me practical things that I can physically do. Mm-hmm. I don't have to be super strong to do, but I can use leverage and other ways to get out of it. I mean, just even how I told you that someone said you should just pick up your feet when someone's choking you, and you're like, why would you do that? You'll choke yourself. You'll hang yourself. And I was like, that's a good, that was really bad advice someone gave me. But I mean, I think people have a lot of misconceptions, like the movies they watch, right? About what they see out there, what they can and can't do. And I think they think if they don't have a gun and they're not specially trained, then they just can't defend themselves. Right.
Well, the opposite side of victimhood is overconfidence.
Yeah.
Right. And I deal with some people like that too, that think they watch these movies of these superheroes and they think that they can pull this stuff off, or they've watched a couple of YouTube videos on, so now they think they can do this stuff. So there's extremes to both ends.
Yeah.
And it's when people come in with training with me, I like to show them what they're capable of, what they're not capable of, and put them in situations that they have to fight out of. So I'm a big fan of scenario-based training. But you are capable of surviving.
Yeah.
You're capable of defending yourself.
Well, I mean, we even talked about, I've had this back surgery, which a fusion happens. So it limits me on movement, and we were even able to work through that and figure out what I could and couldn't do. And it was really interesting because it wasn't until we worked through that I thought to myself, well, wow, I've never realized that I was limited in doing that and what I would need to do to get out of that. And so I think it's really interesting. I think you're approaching this from a way that a lot of people aren't. Right, like a lot of them say, oh, I went to a self-defense class and they told me to kick him in the nuts and run away, And you're like, well, and we joke about that. But I think this is really authentic and unique because it comes from such a different, like you talk about, scenario-based. It's a perspective. You're seeing where people are at and giving them practical ways to get out of it. And I don't have to be a trained Navy SEAL to survive this.
No, you don't. Well, also, so many programs out there are very cookie cutter. Meaning that, hey, this is my program. It's either going to work for you or it's not going to work for you. Or maybe only 20% of this is applicable to you. And the other 80% you're just going to have to drop, but this is just what I teach, so you decide what's good for you. Well, I have the opposite approach. I like to look at you as a person, discuss things with you. That way we don't waste any time teaching you things that aren't important to you or that aren't applicable to you. So I do that not only with individuals, I do that with SWAT teams and other special operations groups, with law enforcement agencies that I teach, because that's important. If people pay you for your time, you don't want to waste their time.
Yeah.
So, and their time is important. So why would I waste their time on skills that they're not going to be able to do, or that aren't applicable to them?
Right.
So it's much more important to look at the person as a whole and develop programs specifically for them, to customize for them or the group or the unit.
Yeah. And I think probably for those of people who are listening, and we joked about this because I'd gotten this advertisement where it showed someone duct tape someone and put a plastic bag over their head and they had to get out of it. And I sent you the video because I was like, thanks for not duct taping me and putting a plastic bag over my head. That probably would have had some issues with that. And you were like, how unrealistic is this? And so I think it's really important for those people who are listening is that when you guys are thinking about doing some type of training, to really dig into it. I nicely stalked you when I was looking up stuff because I was really concerned. I was wanting to do, I'm not an aerobics person. Oh dear God, don't put me in aerobics class. I tried to salsa one time and it was like, no.
You want to do cardio kickboxing?
Yeah. In the best shape of my life, I tried to do Billy Blake. Could not even do that. I was like, this is a joke. So that was so not me. But I was really trying to find something just like this. And I wasn't even sure what I was getting into when I first started. I just thought, this seems like a right direction for me. But I took time to look at it. And there's just, I think when anyone's thinking about doing this is to really look into that, like you said. And is this just like a group class and we're all going to try and do a Karate Kid roundhouse kick or whatever? I probably didn't even say that right, and wax on and wax off and all this stuff. Or is it something that's really applicable to you? And I think for me, being someone who's retired athlete, lots of injuries, I now do a lot of high profile stuff. I needed to find something that worked for me because we talked about I don't always have security with me. And so I think this is really unique. And so for those of you who are listening, if you're driving right now and you're like, oh, I didn't catch, how do I get in touch with Randy or whatever? We'll post all the links. Of course, we're only going to get you for a year and then you're moving to Texas. Now I'm going to have to drive, I'm going to have to fly out to Texas twice a month to get training. But just a little bit as our time is winding down, give us a little teaser of what's coming up with Texas.
Well, my wife and I just bought a house in Texas, and I'm taking the company, my small little company, American Warrior Combatives, and I have some business partners in Texas that really like what I'm doing, and they want to grow it. So we're going to rebrand it. We're going to name the new company Integros, and maybe later I'll tell you the reasoning behind that. But so in Texas, in the Dallas area, we're going to be building, a facility out there where I can teach everything that I'd like to teach with the combative side, with the combat, with the combat shooting side, with the, with scenario rooms. So what we want to do is in Texas, we think there's a lot bigger audience for, that's thirsty for what I teach. Not that there's not here in California, but it's just easier with the shooting side of things. So still going to be doing the same thing that I'm doing now, just on a larger scale, and doing it there in Dallas. And I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's going to take off well there. Texas is my home. Yeah. So I'm pretty excited to go back there and take my kids hunting and fishing just like I used to, some of the places I used to go to. So
get some crocs, some crocodiles. Wait, is it crocodiles or alligators there in Texas?
There's none where I'm at. I'm in North Texas.
Oh, okay.
There's crawdads.
Oh, that's the most exciting thing.
There's armadillos and coyotes.
Well, this has been awesome speaking with you. And for those of you listening, we'll put all the links in the link when you click on this to listen to it. And of course, if you want to catch up with Randy, you can go to his AmericanWarriorCombatives.com site. And then I'm sure you'll fill us in more later as it happens. Maybe you'll post it on your site or something when you're eventually transitioning out there or something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, but as I always say, live, love, laugh, and always be your authentic self.